Morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kelly. I own Dogkind, and I specialize in confidence building for extremely fearful dogs. And our topic today is more on how to build confidence using enrichment, and specifically how to extend that confidence into new situations, new locations. Confidence can be thought of behaviorally as something that occurs maybe as a side effect of a history of repeated success. And what does that mean? It means that our dogs over and over learn that they can use their behavior to get good things. They have a low rate of failure, and this is the part we're talking about today, that they can win the game, they can be successful, they can use their behavior to get good things in lots of different contexts. Now, why does this work? Why can we use enrichment? Because, of course, enrichment involves behavior. And if you set up enrichment well for your dog, they're winning all the time. So you're helping them to build that learning history of success, of using their behavior to get good things. So big picture is just a kind of simpler way to think of it. We teach enrichment skills, and if we do a good job of that, our dogs succeed. They get the good stuff, the positive reinforcement, and they may, as a result, have a feeling of confidence. Now, we can't see that feeling. So what we're focusing on is really just helping them be successful using enrichment skills. But we don't just want our dogs to be successful or quote unquote confident in one location, right? We want them to be confident everywhere, to feel good everywhere, to know how to cope everywhere. And so in this little group of photos on the left here, let's pretend that the enrichment skill that we decided to use is balancing a ball on your head. And we teach our dogs at home, okay, now my dog can balance a ball on their head at home. Let's also teach them to do it in the yard. Okay, how about at a cafe? Now can they do it at the vet? So this is what I mean by teaching these skills everywhere and having your dog learn that they can be successful everywhere. And for the ball balancing example, what does success mean? It might just mean that, they can do it and get a treat for it in all these locations. Okay, so how do we do that? This is really the difficult part. How do we generalize these enrichment skills to new places, especially for sensitive dogs? Anything novel can be quite challenging and scary, so we're going to have to do this carefully. In the last video, I talked about how using props in enrichment games can facilitate the generalization process. So for instance, in this photo, little Buttercup has some yellow coasters on the floor there, and those are props in her sniffing game. And those can go with her to new locations and be something familiar that can help her sort of be successful in those new locations. So watch the last video for more details about using props. Today, we're going to talk about the other important piece of generalization, which is taking the enrichment games into new contexts, but in tiny doable steps for your dog. Remember, we're trying to build a learning history of success, and that's not going to happen if we make changes that are too large and too difficult for our dogs in the enrichment games. So what is a tiny step? This is probably where most of my students struggle the most and make the most mistakes when they're starting out. What a tiny step is pretty individual to the dog, but one thing I can say that is sort of common across almost all of my students is that a tiny step is tinier than they think. What they think is a small step is actually too big for their dog. So another way to frame this is, what constitutes a new context for my dog when I'm thinking about generalizing enrichment games? So let's look at a couple examples from my students to give you an idea of what a new context or a new location might be when you're starting to try to generalize enrichment games in order to generalize what we hope is confidence. So here's little Buttercup, who you saw just a minute ago. And here she is eating treats off of these treat targets. They're just little silicone coasters. And they're right next to her bed. And then here's another photo of her eating off of the coasters next to her bed. And you might say that's the same location. But for a lot of our sensitive dogs, and for Buttercup, that is not the same location. It is a new location. So see in the photo on the left, she's eating off of a coaster that is literally touching her bed. And on the right, she is having to take one step out of her bed, and at least the sort of farthest out coaster is in a new location. So a lot of people will say, oh, my dog did this game right next to her bed. Now I'm going to move it to a new location in another room or even outside. And for a lot of dogs I work with, this location change you see between these two photos, that is the sort of magnitude of change they need. The going to another room or even a foot away from the bed, way too hard. And here's little Randy with another example. Here he is eating. This is a bigger jump, and this was not done in a single step. Here he is eating treats, doing a little sniffing game, just outside of his bed. That's his bed on the right. And then in this photo, he is right on the threshold that is out of that room. You saw it in the previous picture. And so for Randy, this is a new location. And actually, there were probably 15 new locations in between the photo on the left and the one on the right. So again, I want you to think about what is a doable new location for your dog, and recognize that it might not be outside versus, inside, or even another room. It could be something as small as this or what you saw with Buttercup. Okay, one last example, new context. This is taking away the location component and looking at what else might you need to change when you're trying to generalize enrichment skills for your dog, and how that might not have anything to do with the location where you put the enrichment game. Let's take a look at Sky. So here is Sky. She is playing an enrichment game with snuffle mats. You see the blue snuffle mats here. And she's kind of looking around, checking things out. I think there's one actually right in the garage there. Here, let me fast forward a little. So her mom there is loading up the treats and then going away. And she's going so her mom just went into another room, and now Sky is coming in and is going to check out the snuffle mats. There's one right sort of out of view of the camera off the bottom of the screen. There she goes. So there she's finally going to the snuffle mats that her mom just loaded, with her mom in another room. Now if we look at a context change, here there's only one snuffle mat showing right now in this video, and yes, it is in a different location. I know we have video somewhere of the exact same arrangement of snuffle mats with this context change, but I couldn't find it. So pretend that's in the same place, but this is the same hallway area. And what I'd like you to look at is where Sky's mom is. You can see her off the right, on the right side of the screen, doing a puzzle. And this context change, having Sky play the snuffle mat game when mom is that close in the same room, that is a huge context change. So when you're thinking about generalizing your dog's enrichment games, you don't want to just think about changing the location, like where you're placing the snuffle mat or whatever. You might make a change that leaves the snuffle mat or the game where it is, but you make a small context change related to maybe your presence, like how close you are you in view, are you sitting versus standing? All of those are pieces of basically a new situation for your dog. We just tend to forget that those things are necessary. And especially if you want to eventually generalize some of these enrichment games to practical situations, like say at the vet's office or in the car or whatever, you're going to need your dog to be able to happily engage in the enrichment when you're nearby, because you'll have to be with them. So here are your takeaways for today. This is really more about reframing how you think about your dog's progress and enrichment generalization. Remember that a new location could literally be a few inches from the old location, or even 1 inch from the new location, from the old location. A new context could involve something as small as you being in the room or not, or even, sitting on the floor versus sitting in a chair. So think, for the next couple days, think about reframing your conception of what is new for your dog. To successfully generalize enrichment skills, and we're doing this because we're trying to generalize confidence, or how we're thinking about confidence anyway. In order to do that successfully, you have to be able to move these enrichment games into new locations and contexts, but you have to recognize that what is new in your mind might be much too difficult for your dog. And so think about what is new and doable for my dog. And then join me on Sunday. I'll come back and we'll talk about moving enrichment games into more challenging contexts and coming up with a plan for using them that way. All right, if you don't already have your free guide, Your Fearful Dog's First Enrichment Game, grab it there, dogkindtraining.com/fun. And I'll hope to see you in the next video, which again, we'll talk about using enrichment in sort of more distracting situations.